For the average college football fan, it pretty much played out something close to what it was supposed to. Do you take any extra negatives from it that weren't obvious, or any positives from it going forward?
I mean, I think the biggest thing I learned, and this was sort of something I thought about after the Clemson game as well, the one that they lost in the ACC championship game, and it's kind of been the talk of Twitter, not for Notre Dame's purposes, but just in general. I feel like college football has really gotten to the point where wide receivers and just like speed on the outside, especially at corner, and then obviously at wide receiver, is hugely important. I think Notre Dame has narrowed the gap when it comes to physicality and line play and different things like that. But now they need to maybe move past this 50-50 ball type at receiver and maybe bring in some more guys that can stretch the field vertically and do some things in the screen game and stuff like that. And they've had a few guys throughout the years. Obviously, Will Fuller, it comes to mind as a guy over the last 5 or 6 years specifically. And then Braden Lenzy was hurt most of this season, and he kind of would have been that guy this year. But I think that there might need to be a tweak kind of in their recruiting philosophy for that to come to fruition. And then the only other thing is I think, as much as at least me personally loves Ian Book, the player, and obviously he's the winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history. So certainly not a bad player by any means. But when you watch him versus, Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields and even Mac Jones for that matter, you can really see the difference in play and what it might take to get to that level from a quarterback position. So like I said, I think a lot of people hate on Book for almost no reason, because it's really no fault of his own. But Notre Dame could obviously improve in that area as well.
Yeah, as Kyron Williams took in the first touchdown drive, to me, it accentuated what was the positive for Notre Dame in that drive, but also why they wouldn't be able to hang long-term and win the game. Number one, they played a perfect drive. That's exactly what they wanted to do. They kept the ball forever on that drive. They kept making first downs by about that much. They just took the air out of the ball, and it was a perfectly executed drive from the standpoint of just running the football consistently, no big runs, making the throws when they needed to, methodically working the ball down the field, then finally scoring a touchdown and keeping the ball for 8 or 9 minutes.
Yeah,
but
you can't.
It's that sustainable for an entire football game when you can just never get to like a 2nd and 15. Bama gets to a 2nd and 15, not a huge deal. Notre Dame in that game gets to 2nd and 15, and pretty much, the drive's got about a 10% chance of being sustained.
Exactly. And I think that's where kind of where I was going with that is, Notre Dame's offensive philosophy this year was essentially 15 play drives, 10, 15 play drives, take a lot of time off the clock, have time, control the time of possession. And that worked in most games. It even worked the first time against Clemson. But you can't do that against, the elite teams on a consistent basis, because you're not going to be able to do that 4 or 5 times throughout a game and convert on all of them. I mean, because they even had a few other drives against Bama where, they held the ball for a decent amount of time, but they just couldn't put points on the board for, one reason or another.
Yeah, it's hard to be perfect and just be that successful at a methodical rate and never have a negative play and be able to overcome that. And we had the conversations a number of times as Notre Dame has gone into the postseason in the ACC title game in this Bama game, where we talked so much about tight end play, and tight end play has been great. But when you're, again, leaning on 12-yard receptions to change a game, it's just not going to happen. You just need a ton of those to make it happen. So that brings me to the post-game analysis and the comments made by Brian Kelly. And he's got to be sick of answering the same questions about what's it going to take, how far are you from reaching the top, what's the gap, and do you have any thoughts about what he had to say, which was basically, I feel like we're here. We're going to continue to be here. We're going to knock this door down eventually, but, get used to it. I don't have to excuse my team's effort or our program success, because we're getting here and we're going to continue. So get used to it.
I didn't take it like some Notre Dame media did, somewhat personally. I do think as a coach, when you have been as successful as Notre Dame's been over the last, 4 or 5 years, just in general. I mean, I think I read something on Twitter that beyond Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State, Notre Dame has the best winning percentage in college football since 2017. Um, so, I mean, that right there kind of shows you where college football's at. So, I mean, I think to a certain extent, Kelly, you know, it, the reason he's tired of answering these questions is, there might be a part of him that thinks he can't get there. And it's just one of those things where no matter what he says or does or whatever, it's not going to happen. And then the other thing is maybe I mean, I'm sure that there's, a part of them that thinks that they're getting closer and closer, and people just need to be patient at the same time. So I don't know exactly what it is or what he's thinking, um, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure if I was the Notre Dame head football coach, I'd be tired of answering those questions as well.